We always have to remember that Bryan Kohberger and the defense do not have to prove his innocence. The prosecution has to prove that he's guilty. Hey everyone, it's Lucky with Unfiltered Lucky, and I hope that you all are having an amazing day today. I took some time to get my information together, do some research, and kind of gather my thoughts because there's a lot of information coming out right now in the Idaho 4 case. Now this week, I will be uploading multiple videos because we have a lot to talk about. Now, I want to start out with the multiple perpetrator, multiple weapon idea that Bryan Kohberger and the defense are proposing, because I think that it's rather interesting, and I don't feel like a lot of us are surprised by this. When I first heard that the defense was conducting an investigation with regards to multiple perpetrators using multiple weapons, my first thought was, what took so long? I mean, we're 2.5 years in, and I think that a lot of us have believed that there were multiple attackers using multiple weapons from the very beginning. So I was kind of surprised that it took this long for the defense to conduct an investigation looking into this. Because when I first heard about these crimes, right after they occurred, my first thought was that there must have been multiple attackers. I always thought that it was odd that when I was watching the interviews with law enforcement and the families of the victims, they always referred to whoever committed this crime as an individual. It was like they never considered that there was the possibility that there could be multiple suspects. I always thought that that was kind of odd because it almost seemed as though they were pushing the idea that only one person committed this crime before they even had a suspect in custody. Now, about a year ago, I did a video about this very thing, and I asked the question that how did one individual contain 6 people inside a 3-level house? You know, how did one person contain 6 people who were on 3 different levels without anyone fleeing the house or calling 911? It just didn't make sense to me because law enforcement believes that these crimes began on the top level, on the 3rd level inside Maddie's bedroom. So my first thought was, what was everybody doing below them? What were the people doing on the 2nd and 1st level? Because obviously they were hearing stuff, because Dylan said that she heard noises that scared her. Bethany said that she was scared as well. So what were the people on the lower levels doing while Kaylee was on the 3rd level fighting for her life? There's also the possibility that Maddie was fighting back as well, because a lot of people have said that Maddie was asleep, but we don't really know that. We don't know that Maddie was sleeping. I mean, Dylan and Bethany wouldn't be able to confirm that Maddie was sleeping. They didn't even know that there was a quadruple homicide going on inside their house and that their roommates were being attacked with a knife. So how would they know that Maddie was asleep? The only people who could confirm that Maddie was asleep are deceased. So that's always been my question, was how did one person begin to carry out these crimes on the top level of this house and contain the people below them? They could have run at any time. They could have called 911 at any time. There were 4 people below Maddie's bedroom at that time. You had Ethan, Xana, Dylan, and Bethany. So what were these people doing while all this was going on the 3rd level? I remember the comments on that video, and there were a lot of people that were like, well, duh, he snuck in the house while they were all fast asleep, and that's when he attacked them. But now we know that that's not true. Now we know that these roommates were not sleeping. At least all of these roommates were not sleeping. So he didn't just sneak in the house and attack 4 people while they were fast asleep, you know? So now we have to ask the question again. How does one individual contain 6 people who are on 3 different levels of this house without them fleeing the house or calling 911? It just doesn't make sense. And that's why I've always believed that there was more than one attacker. And I also believe that there was more than one weapon. We have to remember that law enforcement is saying that this attacker was in this house by themselves, armed with only a knife. If this attacker began on the 3rd level, as law enforcement tells us that they did, then they obviously felt pretty comfortable inside this house to walk back downstairs, across the house, and into Xana's room in order to attack Xana and Ethan. So there was a lot of noise, I imagine, in Maddie's bedroom. But they didn't seem concerned that anyone had called 911 because they obviously took the time to go downstairs, walk across the house, and go to Xana's bedroom. So it doesn't appear that if one person committed this crime, that they were very worried that 911 would be called. Now, something else that I find rather interesting is that it seems as though whoever committed this crime was very comfortable inside this house. It's almost as though they had a sense of security that 911 would not be called. And it also seems like Dylan and Bethany had kind of a sense of security that they would not be attacked. So think about that for a second. If this person was in this house alone, they still have to consider the fact that they need to exit this house after this is all over and make it to their vehicle to escape. So I'm sure they're taking this into account while all of this is happening. But it doesn't seem as though they're taking into account that police could be on the way. And they weren't on the way. So that's what's so odd, is that they weren't concerned that law enforcement was on the way, and law enforcement was not on the way because they had not been called. So was that just a coincidence? And I'm not saying that it's impossible for one person to have committed this crime, but I've always said that if one individual did commit this crime, then in my opinion, they would have had to be extremely proficient with a knife. You're talking about 4 very physical attacks with one weapon. So they would have needed to be very proficient with a knife. And in my opinion, they would have had to be familiar with the house as well as the people living in this house. Let's talk about the DNA that was found inside the house, because we know that there were multiple sources of DNA that were found in this house by investigators that didn't belong to Bryan Kohberger. We also know that there was DNA found under Maddie's fingernails from multiple sources that didn't belong to Bryan Kohberger. So why did investigators make the decision not to do a thorough investigation into these other sources of DNA? I mean, that makes no sense. Obviously, the DNA, the touch DNA that was found on the knife sheath is going to take priority because it's on a knife sheath, and they believe that a knife was used to carry out these crimes. So obviously that's going to take priority. But if someone's DNA is on a wall or on a door or on a handrail, then you know that that person was inside that house. The fact that Bryan Kohberger's touch DNA was found on a knife sheath that was inside the crime scene basically just tells us that the knife sheath was inside the crime scene. It doesn't necessarily prove that Bryan Kohberger was inside the crime scene. Like I said, if his DNA was found on an immovable object, then that would make more sense that he was inside that house. But the fact that it was on a knife sheath, that knife sheath could have come from anywhere. And we've discussed that before, because anybody could have brought that in and it could have had Bryan Kohberger's touch DNA on it. But if there's DNA inside the house, on the wall or the handrail, then whoever that DNA belongs to was obviously inside that house. So people have said, well, we don't know when that DNA got there. Well, we don't know when that knife sheath got there. So it doesn't make sense that they wouldn't thoroughly investigate all of the DNA that was found inside the crime scene. Think about what Steve Gonsalves said. And it's weird because I think that these are very important statements. Now, Steve Gonsalves said that these were statements that were made to him by the coroner, Kathy Mabbitt. So it seems like they would be rather important. But it seems like everyone just kind of glosses over this. And to me, it's important when Steve Gonsalves says that the coroner told him that there was one hell of a battle going on down there. There was one hell of a battle happening inside this house. So how do we go from this guy just snuck in while everyone was fast asleep to there was one hell of a battle happening inside this house? And that makes sense. I mean, was there one hell of a battle going on, or was everyone fast asleep? You know, it would make sense that one person could have carried out this crime if everyone was asleep. But I've never believed that whole idea about everyone in this house being asleep. You know, law enforcement made it sound like this guy just snuck in the middle of the night and crept up on these people while they were all sleeping. But I've never believed that. I mean, we're talking about 6 college students who liked to party. They were living in a house that was basically smack dab in the middle of where everyone was partying. There were people partying at the frat houses. There were people partying at the apartments next door. And these 6 roommates, or 5 roommates and Ethan, were just inside their house, all tucked away, fast asleep. I just don't believe that. You know, that doesn't make any sense to me, that they all just decided to turn in while everyone was partying all around them. I mean, think about that. Something else that Steve Gonsalves said that really caught my attention is that he stopped an interview that him and Christy Gonsalves were doing to make a very important point. And the point was that the wounds between Kaylee and Maddie did not match. Now, why would he stop and make it a point to say this? I don't think that he was saying this because he was trying to tell people that one knife could have made a variety of different wounds. In my opinion, he was trying to say exactly what he said. The wounds did not match. I just think that it's odd that when this all began and law enforcement came out and told us what they believe happened, it doesn't really make sense with the information that we know now. I mean, they came out and told us that these roommates were attacked and that they were likely all asleep. They made it sound as though someone crept into this house and took them by surprise. So it makes me wonder why law enforcement would want to lead us to believe that all of the roommates in this house were asleep when now we know that they were not. So I think that it's rather interesting that now Bryan Kohberger and the defense are investigating the possibility of multiple perpetrators using multiple weapons. But if you really think about it, how is this investigation going to go? Because you figure they've already knocked down the house and buried it. They erased the IGG investigation, and they're having all kinds of problems with their cellular phone data. Now we know that Dylan was extremely intoxicated. So that brings her credibility into question as far as what she witnessed. So, how does the defense now investigate this? It almost feels as though the prosecution kind of wanted to make sure that there was never another investigation. I mean, they said that they were going to make a model of this house, but this model isn't even to scale. So it almost appears to me as though the prosecution and these investigators tried to ensure that there would never be another thorough investigation. And that's just my opinion. But, I do believe that there were multiple attackers using multiple weapons. And I believed that from the very beginning. If you go back in my videos, I have said that from the very beginning. So it's interesting that Bryan Kohberger's defense is just now bringing that up 2.5 years later. Now, I'm glad that they are, but it just seems like a lot of us have known this or suspected this from the very beginning. So it surprises me that they're just getting to this right now. Let me know what you think in the comments. And thanks for hanging out with me today. I really do appreciate it. And if you liked my video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to my channel. Now, like I said, I'm going to be doing multiple uploads this week because we have a lot to talk about. I'm also going to be doing a live on Thursday evening with Pete Altieri from Murder Metal Mayhem at 7 p.m. Central Time. So keep an eye out for that. And I hope that y'all had an amazing day. We'll see you next time.